to me, everybody's speaking a different language.
It's exactly what you said. We're having very different conversations, even though we're speaking the same language, right? Well, that comes from opaqueness of needs. So in other words, I want something, but I'm not going to tell you what I want. I'm going to try to suss out how to get it from you. If you could get what you want immediately, then you probably wouldn't want it.
Over the course of my life and career, I've discovered the power of consciously investing in mindset and personal development. It has been a true game changer for me in my personal and professional life, and I'm extremely excited that you decided to join us today to take one step forward in your own life. Most of my breakthroughs have come from one-on-one conversations. We created this show to bring you those unfiltered conversations each and every week.
We made it, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Connected Mindset Live. This is going to be one that's going to shake your soul. Greg's a little bit on one this morning, and it's going to be one for the books, one that I've been looking forward to having for a while since we started this show. One of the gentlemen, one of the folks that I connected to before this show existed, and really helped me to manifest what I felt like this show became and has become. And you guys are supporters of that mission. So very appreciative that you decided to join us this morning, whether you're watching this live or a recording on YouTube or LinkedIn. Very appreciative of you guys tuning in. And before we dive in, just want to mention a couple things about what we're going to talk about here. The title of this episode is all about community. As we're navigating our daily lives, we're all trying to find community, whether you're a part of one, or you're trying to find that next person that's going to help you, in your next stage of your growth, whether it's business or personal life. So we're going to talk a lot about community, but before we dive in here, Mr. James Doe, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing this morning?
GT, how are you, sir? Man, you're such a stud. That intro is just incredible. Every time I watch it, man, I feel like I'm on SportsCenter.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate that. So give the listeners a little bit of the mission James is on, and what do you hope that each person listening in today walks away with?
Man, so you when you said that earlier, I just tried to think, what is my mission? And I can't even, it's hard to distill down into something that I could say is, this is my mission, man. So when I think about mission, that's something I would have to probably go back and manicure. But I can tell you that, in terms of what I want people to walk away with, and I don't know if that speaks to what my mission might be, because it's I could say I speak about it for others, but it's really for me. And so number one is, I would say walk away with that. I believe that right here and right now, you are it, you're valid, you're valuable, point blank, period. And then the second piece I would say is, so I am the Chief Annoyance Officer of Hampton Roads. If anybody knows me, I play that role very well. So if you walk away with anything from being around me, if you believe in what I do and you want to assist me in that, then walk away with that. You cannot take tomorrow for an answer. So those would be the two things.
Man, every time I come across James, he says Chief Annoyance Officer. It's almost like Chief Waking Up Officer. Every time I come across James, I may be going through the day, doing my normal business activities, which is something I'm interested in. It's something that makes me feel alive. But he always gives me words that make me think about, what am I actually doing here? And it makes me feel like I have something that people need. And I think a lot more people need to recognize that you are the solution. Everybody's looking for the answers around them. And a lot of times you need to look within and believe in yourself. And when you say Chief Annoyance Officer, I think you're walking around waking people up throughout Hampton Roads, but beyond, because they go back home, they see what you're posting on social media, and initially they may question that, oh, maybe that's too good to be true, or why am I the one when it's really about other people? I want to be a servant leader, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that people are chasing. Let's take a little bit of a step back on, what got you there to recognize the importance of community, and, how has community impacted you to now be that person that is out in front to say, I'm annoying people so much to bring them along to the journey of where I see this community going?
So I'll tell you personally what brought me to that place. So what woke me up, and I don't know, you're too kind. I don't know I wake anyone else up, or that I don't necessarily think I know I don't have the capability to wake someone else up. I mean, we all have to wake ourselves up, I guess. But something that woke me up. So I've been in small business for a long time, 20 something years. So a couple of realizations I found along the way is that it's not everyone else, it's you. That's just, at some point we're gonna all have to come to that realization. It's not that, it's not that good help is hard to find. It's not that, whatever the million excuses we can make. It's you. Every time it's gonna be you. If you want it to work, it's gonna be you. But it's easy to forget that. So my most recent alarm clock or wake up call is in this community. So it speaks to why I'm kind of so fervent, to use Tim and Zach's word, about this community. But I was actually in the ICAP program, which is an amazing program, 2-week boot camp. If anyone knows what the lean startup cycle is, or that whole concept of lean startup, iterative cycling, it's Virginia's version of that. So I've been doing that stuff for like more than a decade, right? So I went into the program thinking, hey, I got this. This is a layup. I do this in my sleep. But long story short, I was open enough to give myself the gift and the opportunity to actually listen to what was being told. And so when we went at the end of the 2 weeks, we give a presentation, and so they ask you like the insights you had. And my final insight out of the 3 was that it's something I always say, and I know, but it took me to come full circle, which is like the second you think you know anything is when you prove you know nothing, right? And so coming from a technical background, over 35 years of coding experience, and feeling like that made any difference to success, and pretty soon realizing that actually it's and again, it's something I've told people 100 times, but to be woken up with that is what made me understand that it's going to take everybody. It's going to take people you do like, people you don't like, people who you agree with, people who you disagree with. Like they say, rising tides raise all ships. And so to be truthfully transparent, I realized that for me to go where I want to go professionally, the community around me had to change. And so again, it goes back to what I said earlier, which is it's always you. And so the choice is, do I leave the community or find this magical community where everything's there for me, which doesn't exist? It doesn't exist. Or do I do something different? Because that's the only way that stuff is going to happen, is if you do something different. So I would say that is why I'm supercharged about everyone else getting on a bandwagon with this concept. And I'm not smart. This is not stuff I've made up. It's stuff I've told people a million times because I've learned it from tons of people before me. But impossible takes a week when you have community. And so that was a real, I tend to ramble, so that was a rambling way to go about that. But yeah,
definitely not a ramble. I think all of that it's valuable when people feel resistance, they want to run, right? They want to run to the next island, and then when they face resistance there, they want to hop to the next one. And we're always chasing this, what seems like greener grass or the silver rabbit of the day, especially in technology. I mean, you've been through, your own technology revolutions internally as you've learned different skill sets. Obviously, things around you are changing around what people in the community value when it comes to technology, and the latest buzzwords that are coming about. What do you see as the biggest elements when you were in that ICAP program that's kind of stood out to you as this community obviously needs to come together, but what commonalities would bring them together, if that makes sense? So like what would help people, because to me, everybody's speaking a different language, right? We may be all speaking English, but it's all different types of English, and everybody's like, this is my type of English, and this is my area of Hampton Roads, right? This is my city and my territory. And that's always happened. I feel like that happens all around the world, where people are, they're fighting for their bucket, right? And how do we get people out of the bucket, out of the proverbial blender, and kind of get them into something that you can start to mash what everybody really wants at the end of the day, but they commonly don't talk about. They're just talking about, what they think other people want. So how do we meet in the middle better? And how do we bring people together on a common mission, and then we can work through all of the other things that come about?
Right. So great questions. So again, I'm not smart. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So Marshall Rosenberg authored a concept called nonviolent communication. So actually, if I understand correctly, Marshall Rosenberg came to Norfolk when they did the first integrated school here.
Really?
So he's originally a psychologist, I believe, trained psychologist, but he dealt in conflict resolution. And then he applied a lot of other, not necessarily adjacent concepts, and came up with this framework called nonviolent communication. So if you see, you mentioned in my description, so where I'll say, imagining a world where everyone's needs can get met. Directly lifted from Marshall, right? So him coming in with this sort of esoteric, but also medical background, and then a lot of real world experience with conflict resolution. I'm gonna try and summarize, but I encourage everyone to it's amazing what he's passed. He's not with us anymore, but it's amazing stuff. It's all over YouTube. Very amazing stuff. But to summarize, my take on some of the concepts is that the transparency of needs is the problem. And so it's exactly what you said. We're having very different conversations, even though we're speaking the same language, right? And so that comes from opaqueness of needs. So in other words, I want something, right? I want something from you, but I'm not going to tell you what I want. I'm going to try to suss out how to get it from you. You know what I mean? And when that's unsuccessful, then we get pushback. And so that's why a lot of times we're like, well, why are you being weird? All right. And it's because we're not speaking the same language, which is the language of needs, and the language of the emotions. Because the other thing is sometimes we don't know what the need is. Mm-hmm. And particularly, I think when the culture is not community-based, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit, I guess. Mm-hmm. When the culture is not community-based and it's accolade-based, it's easy to get lost that way. So I don't think there's, anything we can pile on to the situation that's going to help. I think we can remove things and help. But I think before we kind of analyze how to do that, if people are just transparent about the needs, that's the starting place, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that's easier said than done. Maybe it's easier done than said, but there are a lot of blockages, right, to people doing that. So that would be, I think the sure way to do it is to stop creating more organizations, stop creating more programs, and start being transparent on a fundamental level. What do we individually need? And how can we all help us to do that? Because in Marshall's framework, I can't remember the exact way he says it, but it's like he's saying it's a suicide. He's saying a lot of what goes on are suicidal expressions of a need, which means I want this from you, but I'm going to treat you in every way that would never get that out of you. So again, I'm butchering, what the way he actually breaks all this down. But if I could put it into something that's tangible for people to walk away with, is find transparency in needs when you're having meetings with people, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can come to common ground and find good solutions.
Yeah, process of elimination, as opposed to adding more in and feeling like that is activity that is productive towards the end goal. I think you mentioned it perfectly. It's easier done than said, because a lot of times we want to put words to something. We want to oversell or over talk about something because it feels good, right? But the doing doesn't necessarily feel good until you get to that accolade of what's accepted around you. And I think that's the main resistance from doing anything that is. It's like quiet motion, right? It's the quiet motion doesn't get the validation. It doesn't get the people saying good job, great job, along that path. And I think a lot of people on that journey, give up because they're not getting that pat on the back. They're not getting that, the initial funding, or they're not getting that thing that they feel they need, because that's what everybody tells them that they need, right? And I think that's when you hit on transparency of need, most people hide what they need because they want people to tell them. And then if you tell somebody you need something like, hey, I need this business deal, and you guys also need, this as well, based off of what I'm hearing, that makes people feel like they're being like too needy, like they're telling them something and it's making them too vulnerable, which is like, my business isn't in a good place, or my community is not in a good place because I need something in order to continue to grow it. And I think that's, that path is where a lot of people derail and they go a different direction. How do you keep people on that path? And I think you hit on it earlier. It's got to come from an internal light or an internal source. But when the community's all transparent on their needs, you realize other people have needs as well that they're not trying to hide. And then I think that can spark a discussion.
Yeah. I mean, Marshall Rosenberg says that, so this is the way that he says it. If he's in a seminar, he says, we can take the married couple with the longest standing grudge, like longest standing beef. And he said, within 20 minutes from when they actually hear each other's needs. So not when you say each other's needs, but when they actually hear each other's needs, that there will be a solution. So, and again, I'm butchering, so I encourage everyone to actually look into this. Like YouTube is a reservoir for this stuff. But the way he says it is that we spend majority of our time discussing strategy. And that's the problem. We get really angry discussing strategy. Not often discussing emotions. We spend a lot of time discussing things, like things that we think, analyses, right? This person is that. He has another concept called enemy image, right? Which you formulated what this person is, which is never going to be the full breadth of anyone. And then you use that as the basis for how you interact with this person. And that person is always evolving, right? And he's also evolving off of the way you treat them, right? So yeah. The first step is transparency of needs. If you can do that, maybe you can find common ground in that. And if you can do that, maybe you can collaborate. But a lot of our collaboration is competition in disguise.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost think about that as the ego, but we're all battling that for one. But I heard something the other day that we tend to treat people we don't really meet people in the middle. We tend to treat people in the way that we see them. So we're almost like labeling somebody and then treating them as that label, as opposed to saying, instead of asking questions. I think a lot of us, we have the answer and then we treat people with those answers internally, as opposed to asking them questions and then treating them based off of what we're hearing from those answers, not just what they're saying. I like how you put that. It's not what necessarily those needs being verbally put out there. It's actually what you're hearing and digesting with it. So I think that's kind of that everybody values the listener, or active listening. Not enough people actively listen. I think they're like passively listening, waiting for the next thing that they're going to say. And I think that's something we can all work on personally and professionally, is, actually taking a step back when we're having conversations, and what is the person actually saying at the end of the day. And I think oftentimes we don't hear what people are saying. We're already labeling what they're saying with our thoughts on who that person is. And I think that's big with culture. I think we'll kind of dive into that aspect. Within any culture community, you identified it when you were in that ICAP program. There were some cultural things that needed to be stripped away in order for things to take place around you that would impact you as well. I think we're all a piece of a community. We're all players in that game, players on the field. But if we're not getting that immediate value, like we're not feeling like we're benefiting, right? It's that competition. You mentioned it, very, very clearly. It's like that collaboration is competition. I think when people approach it like that, it's hard to be friends when we're on opposite ends of the dugout, and it feels like if you get a win, then it's a loss to me. And I think that's what the community around us, most people continue to talk about it like that. It's like if this county or this city wins, takes away from this other city, and then it's like we want the rail, we want the railroad, or we want the building or the business to come in here. So how do we smooth that out and make it? I know it's not, you don't have to have a necessary answer for it, but what have you learned since you had that moment of clarity and ICAP, from how do we get people to put that aside?
I think it'd be hubris to say I've learned anything. When we get there, maybe I'll learn something. But I'll talk about a couple of different concepts. Again, I stand on the shoulders of giants. So something we talked about, was that you and Jeff, and I was asking you here in assembly.
Yeah.
If you, it was a cybersecurity conversation, but it was kind of like what you're doing here now, right? It's almost esoteric in nature, which is if you get rid of all the accolades, right, as far as your cybersecurity company, and you get rid of all the achievements, what's left? And it's a rhetorical, but it's the question. It really is the question, because it's to the point that you're making, which is, I think, number one, individually, we all have to discover that you're never going to get something and that's going to be it. You're never going to get the money and that's going to be it. You're never going to get the house and that's going to be it. You're never going to be dominant in market share and that's going to be it. So you, at some point, whether it's through that process of chasing those things, or if it's now that you take time to think about it, you're going to have to think about when all that stuff is gone, what's left. And the reality is 80+% of the time is when you don't have that stuff, right? Or you wouldn't be chasing it. So it's a rhetorical, but, if we wanted to encapsulate it, we could say a need is what is left. But that need looks so different across person to person that it's hard to use that word to encapsulate it. But that's the closest thing I can say is the answer to that. That's not really the answer, if you get what I'm saying. Because for everyone, we don't know what it is. And that's probably I say this entrepreneurship thing is like a spiritual journey. And it sounds very esoteric, but if you know what being a startup founder really is, which is not accolades, it's not achievements, and it's not success, then you're the thing that's going to have to change most. in that process.
Mm-hmm.
So using that as the basis, right? We'll jump around a little bit. So Alan Watts, I don't know if you know who Alan Watts is. He's a speaker. I'm talking about needs. He says, like, what do you want? And when you think about it, you don't know what you want. You don't know what you want. Because if you could get what you want immediately, then you probably wouldn't want it, right? It'd be so easy. It'd be like going to the post box, right? To the mailbox, right? You don't really like put a lot of thought into getting your mail. You just go get the mail. So the things we want are usually things outside of our reach that we don't control, and we don't know what the end goal is going to be. Typically, for most people, right? It's an aspiration. It's something different than what we have now, and we don't really appreciate what we have now. Usually, if you confer that, what you need is typically the same thing that someone else needs, right? It's usually we all are trying to acquire the same thing. We're just arguing about the strategy to get it. And we're staking all of our time and energy on the strategy and what role I play, right? Sometimes we're going to bite off way bigger pieces of the apple than we want to chew. I'd say that's what happens 99% of the time. Because we don't want to delegate. We don't want to dilute. We don't want to lose control. We call it ownership. We call it equity, but we don't want to lose control. So, all right, hopping back into something more tangible, there's this concept of asset-based community development. All right, again, I'm not making any of this stuff up, or I'm not brilliant. This is all stuff we should all know this stuff. And tons of great minds that have put energy into this stuff. So asset-based community development says, instead of the typical way of looking at community development, which is we come into a community and we say, this is everything that's wrong. We do a needs assessment and then try and create a program that solves this calculated need. Asset-based community development says that every person in the community is a gift, or it has a gift already by default. They don't need training to do it. They don't need a program to do it. They don't need per se money or payment to do it. They have something that they can do uniquely well that contributes to the community. And so there are about 5 pillars, but at the bottom, or 5 components of this framework. But at the bottom are people in the community, the people, with the assumption that every person has a gift and is a gift to the community in some form or way, whether that's locked or unlocked. Every person uniquely has a gift. That's where you should start from, right? Because that's not the top-down approach of a leader and then I get people to work for me. That is, what are your needs? What are the problems in the community? And what can you do to change it? And that gets back to never taking tomorrow for an answer. Never taking steps that require someone else. So I don't know if that kind of answers some of the stuff you were asking about, but these are all things that I'm butchering because they're way more dense than I'm the way I'm expressing them. But in context of our community, it comes down to what can we do to create successes with our. So in other words, we maybe want to see what we can do to service the needs of some of our existing businesses and to make them great, and to see if we can make businesses that grow in that way versus making competitors in our space right now, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to deduplicate efforts. But to do that, there's got to be a transparency of needs. So maybe somebody requires a salary, but they're not saying they need a salary, right? They're saying, hey, I'll just be a founder. And then what happens is we don't get where we need to go because we're going in different directions. Even though we're all in meetings, we're all saying things, right? I think a lot of us have deliverables. Mm-hmm. From our hierarchies, we have deliverables, but we don't speak in the language of deliverables. We speak in the language of superlative and dreams and jargon, right? Mm-hmm. So the quicker we get to those needs and find out where the needs overlap, and the quicker we use the resources we currently have as a group to service the individual needs, the quicker we can learn enough to get to the next level. I don't again, in this framework of asset-based. So versus saying that there's a problem and we'll have a program to fix it, you can't really get to B before you cross A, which is identifying the people. And I don't want to say exploiting their gifts because there's a negative connotation with the word exploiting, but it's the truth. And exploiting everyone's individual gifts for a goal that serves everyone's individual deliverables.
Yeah, actually, I haven't heard of asset-based community development. And I do think exploiting is the right word, because you're exploiting, the person's exploiting their gifts and the community is exploiting them. And that needs to happen. Like those types of, what I look at as like critical words, like you have to bring it out. And sometimes that is a difficult process, and exploiting is intrusive. And in order to wake people up, it has to be somewhat intrusive, because it's what everybody really wants. And you mentioned it spot on, as far as when you boil down all of the stuff that we're talking about, all the things that we do, all the activities we're going through, and you take it away, what's left, right? When you take away the business, the funding, the people, the activities that everybody's doing, what's really left at the end of the day, in life, not just in the business, but all the accolades that we're constantly chasing, the trophies on the wall. If your house burns down, what's left, right? And it's you as a person, that gift that you have, or the people around you have. And do you think people need to start there, of what gift do I have, or do they start with needs of the people around them?
I think they're synonymous, if we're being honest. If we're being honest.
Yeah.
If I talk to one of our fellow founders and I say, what do you want? And they tell me something about another person, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
It's the truth. If we're being honest, there's no way. There's no way you want to help 100 people before you help yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I don't think that's how it's framed. It's framed in the language of accolade and achievement. It's not framed in the language of validity or value. So yeah, I don't, trying to be well-meaning with my words.
You definitely are. You definitely are.
A lot of us are spending time looking at the aggregate of how many people we can help, and days are passing and we're not helping the individual people that we need to get to the aggregate number. And you can't get to B before you finish A.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I ramble, but to answer your question, I don't think there's a difference between what you need and what you should be doing to grow towards helping someone else's need. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's synonymous, and I think if we put our attention towards that, then the other things come into play, right? Because they for me, businesses amount to vehicles to make something that's happening more efficient. And so as you were speaking about, it's you that's left. And if your company burned to the ground and every record burned to the ground, the only thing that would be left would be the narratives that people could talk about. This happened to me because I used this, right? It's not going to be like they saved me $100 that year. It's never going to be that. They're not going to remember the $100 you saved them. It's like, this is the truth. That can't be it. Those things are a dime a dozen, and anyone can replicate that. We talk about applications, and if I've had the opportunity to annoy you, then I've told you, if the first thing you're starting with is an app, then you've lost already, because anyone can replicate an app. It's not going to be the app. It's going to be the app automates what you do, and it allows you to scale what you do and to offer it to more people and to get data back from people a lot faster, and then to analyze that data and get better at what you do. The people that work with you, because no one will work for you. It's never going to, not in 2024. It's never going to happen again. No one will work for anyone, I think, ever again.
Yeah.
But the people that work with you have to believe in what you're doing so much. And so that's where your energy should be, right? Not in necessarily the idea, but in the group of people that extenuate what you do. Because when all that goes away, it's never going to be the pitch deck. It's not going to be the amount of money you raised. It's not going to be how big your building was. It's not going to be the award that you won. It's going to be like the amount of people, or the stories, and the richness of those stories of those people that have been affected by the process, not the app. not the logo, not the brand voice. These are mechanisms and vehicles. The vehicles can change. You can get a new car, but the driver, typically you want it to be the same. You want it to still be you, right? So yeah, that's another ramble. But the point I'm just trying to make is that there's a weird inverse relationship between what becomes the community, which there are a couple of more steps. It's about the A, B, C, D, E. We're out of like E when we get to community in this framework of asset-based community management. So there's a lot more that has to go through. And the second step from people is called associations. And these are your ad hoc associations. This is your bridge club. This is your pickleball club. Right? This is you and I talking about this wacky stuff on the podcast, right? And the group of us founders that have these type of conversations. These are groups of educators across different schools here in our region coming together to talk about the kids. You know what I mean? These are the next steps. But these associations have to form around needs. They can't be products of competition. They won't be. And so that's the next step, right? But you can't get to these associations without creating a platform where it's okay to be transparent about the needs. And so that's why it's going to require you, and I mean me, you, whoever's watching, to find that niche, that place within yourself where you can make that real-time value. And you can find the people that you can associate with and grow. And this is well before we get to like funding or pitch decks, right?
Yeah.
It's actually creating a difference in real time today, more than one customer a day. I hate the word customer. We need a better word than that, by the way. You and I have to look for a way better word than customer. I don't like that word.
I think contributor, because they're contributing to you sharing your gift and you're delivering something that they need. And I think, people just rush to the accolade, and we both been there. And we both continue potentially to do it, periodically. I mean, I came from a sports background, so it was all about the next win of the game or the next strike that was thrown on the field, where it was like, oh, somebody validates that I'm using my gift to do what's approved by the umpire or, by the surrounding people. And I don't think there's necessarily an answer to this question. And you mentioned it just a minute ago on how do we bring the people to the concept before getting the validation from the funders or from the VCs locally or the angel groups. I think that people are like, I want to start a company. I see an idea. I have a gift. I have a vision for where the world's headed. And it's like, all right, pitch deck. Let's schedule some meetings without the people around it to say, hey, come in. You believe in what we're doing here. Let's all shake this up. And then if that makes sense in the future, so people want to get the funding without actually serving the people. And I think a lot of that happens in person, right? Or over these types of video calls, or, you have to connect with people first and then go get all of that other stuff. And it's kind of like people say the MVP or the beta, like bringing yourself as this gift into the world and testing it with actual people. I don't think people do that enough. And some people call it customer discovery, or there's all types of frameworks out there for validating your gift and validating what's out there. But I don't think people are connecting enough to individuals and, asking questions, right? It's, hey, here's my gift. What do you have going on lately? What do you think your gift is? It's like, I haven't heard that question in probably my entire life. So it's, how do we facilitate those conversations and then make it a part of a wider, maybe group conversation? And I think maybe that's at the core of why in our community so many groups have started, because people want people to come together and ask the right questions, but then it just becomes the same conversation of we're broken, everything's broken, let's just add more to the fire, and maybe the fire will look better and burn down the city.
And this is the concept of the asset-based versus the needs assessment, right? Because if we come together and listen, we'll find what we're looking for. But if the meetings we're having are based on finding the countless holes we can always find, then, we're just going to stack wood on the fire. We're going to get more upset. And this goes back to something really awesome that you just spoke to, which is the way you analogized. If we take baseball and we look at that game and the rules and the history, and we aggregate it into a community, and you have this gift, but it's within the context of the community, because you're the gift. You can do way more than throw a ball, obviously, right? But it's within the context of the community and the perspective of the community's rules that exists. So if you have a community that says that what matters here is what happens at the end of 9 innings, right? Or as sports has become, has gone away from athleticism, to say it that way, what size your contract is, right? And the potential for you to travel, and then we get into NIL, right? So we're going into uncharted territory, which I think is cool, but it's very, you know what I mean? This is a community. It's what it is, right? When we talk about sports, the racial communities, because it started out with the Jewish American community, right, when it was created, and then it went to the brown community, and now it's an international community, right? So we've seen it flows with opportunities, and the community has shifted and changed, and what the NBA means, and the average age, and how long people last in the league is constantly changing. So you can look at our community as a league, and whether we admit it or not, or whether we write the rules down or not, there are rules, spoken or unspoken. And so, no, I don't think we're going to find it. And I think that's the problem. Rather than saying, well, scrap the game and let's create the new rules, we can actually say, hey, there are no rules. Let's go see what everyone can do. Let's see what everyone needs, and see if people can get everything they need without the suicidal expression of it, right? Which is, I want, so I'll give you an example. I want to be able to sleep at night and still have my company grow. So then I micromanage people, right? And I get upset when inevitably it never works, right? And what I have to do is really scary. I have to become a different person. I have to learn to manage people in a completely different way. Or I need to bring on someone who can help me with that. Which means maybe I need to give up a lot of my company. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I don't get honest about the fundamental thing, which is I want to run a company and I don't have the skill set to do it, right? And it's easy to mask that in pitch decks and not getting funding and thinking that it's you or your idea, when you cannot put the community first without having the people in the community, right? Which is what's happening, again, with your awesome analogy of sports. We have a lot of people coming into sports for what they can get out of it, right? And it's exploitative, mutually exploitative, but not in a way where everyone's needs are getting met. People getting chewed up in the ringer, right? And that's the community. So you can either look for the community that exists that does that, which I'm not sure where that those exist right now, or you could start from the gifts and be really open to where the community goes, be really open with your needs, and create these associations. I talk about collaboration a lot, but I think I was in a meeting with Sarah Brown and Amber Hamilton. So one of them said it, but they were talking about boundaries. And so with collaboration has to come the boundaries. Some things don't fit, and we have to be okay with saying that, because that's the way things are. We just don't express it, right? And we don't express it for fear of loss of our own need. But again, it ends up a suicidal expression of that, because we'll never be able to make something work. It's never going to be like one of us is so smart that we create a company and then it works and it's $1 billion company, right? It's going to be pain. It's going to be growth. And so we're putting the cart before the horse often, right? We're looking at the finished $1 million company, and we're not thinking about the fact that your idea probably has 2 or 3 years of getting its butt kicked before it should be ready for this stuff. And you want to get people that are going to help you get there as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we put Band-Aids on ourselves throughout the journey, thinking that that's going to heal the wound, when we need other cells, other people to help along that journey. I like to say we're most of us, and I'm in this boat a lot of the times, is we're living in a spectator sport where we're running with our gift, but we're looking out to the fans to see what they're doing, if they're clapping or they're booing. So it's just, I think that's important. And it takes great leaders. What do you think when you think of a leader? Obviously we're all leading ourselves. We are all leaders in some way with our unique gift. When you see people in the community that are representing that leadership, what few words or what few traits come to mind? It may be just the transparency of needs, rolling back to that. But is there anything else that folks listening in today can do to be a better leader for their community? Because I think everybody wants this, but they don't know how to either get out of their own way or get in the right lane to make this happen.
Yep, great question. So again, it'd be hubris for me to say what a leader is or isn't, but I do want to answer my opinion to your question. So I'll go back to what I want to ask people to walk away with, which is these two things. You're already valid. You're already valuable. You're already enough. You have to start there.
Yeah.
You have to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is not that it's going to be fun or easy or forgiving or rewarding. And if those are required, then you might not want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So number one is you got to know that you're valid, you're valuable, you're enough right there where you're at right now. You got to get there if you're not there already. I don't think you should start. I don't think you can lead before you do that. And I'm not saying it's easy to do. And I'm not saying it's something that you have perpetually. None of us will ever have it perpetually. None of us probably even have it most of the time. But in those times when you don't have it, you have to be able to know it. Because that's all you have. When everything burns away. That's the only thing you're ever going to have. If you take that with you, because the gifts, everybody has the gifts. You can't get rid of those if you wanted to. Those are a completely separate thing from that knowing that you're enough. Know that you're enough without a single gift. You got to figure that out. Then you cannot take tomorrow for an answer. If you do those two things, they'll probably call you a leader. And you probably won't even know why. Because you'll just be doing what you normally do.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. Yeah, that's what people put terms to it. They put confidence, they put leadership, they put all these labels on it. But really it's like you said, it's getting to the point where you're enough. And then not looking to tomorrow as the answer. I think that's what it's all about. You got to comment in the notes here. James, been a pleasure. A little bit of wrap up here. A question we like to ask everybody that joins the show is, what does connection or being connected mean to you today?
So I thought about this because I know you asked everyone else. So connection is when you remove the illusion of separation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going with. But I prepared for this one, so yeah.
Couldn't tell either way. It's always a pleasure, James. Your time is valuable to me. What you're putting out in the world, you're connecting people, and that's what ultimately this show is trying to be a force multiplier for. Thanks for everything you do in our local community. I can feel it stemming way beyond just Hampton Roads, and I want to acknowledge you for everything you're putting out. Keep it up, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, we gotta get up sooner than later, like really sooner than later. And yeah, Hampton Roads, we will be the top 5 MSA in the United States before they know it. I promise.
I love it. Looking forward to being a part of it. Thanks so much, James.